everyone. Welcome to the Find a Moment podcast, where we navigate the space between ideals and everyday life. We are your hosts, Gretchen Roberts and Jennifer Ford, and we look forward to finding a moment with you today.
Hey, welcome back to the second episode of our health and wellness series. And today we're going to be talking about nutrition and exercise. In the first episode, if you haven't caught it yet, you might want to go back and listen to that before you get too far into this. We really just kind of laid the groundwork for our ideals and kind of how those work out in daily life and different resources and things that we can use to help guide us and make decisions and help us to make goals. Gretchen shared a lot of good, chunky information for us about ways to incorporate that information and how to kind of have a long view towards consistency. And there's a lot of really good specific information in that episode. But welcome to Nutrition and Exercise. We're going to be just sharing more information, of course, talking about ideals in everyday life and how all of that looks as we are prioritizing health and wellness. So as we are moving into our conversation on nutrition, I just thought it would be good to start out with a scripture from Ezekiel that says, "Fruit trees of all kinds will grow on both banks of the river. Their leaves will not wither, nor will their fruit fail. Every month they will bear fruit because the water from the sanctuary flows to them. Their fruit will serve for food and their leaves for healing." That's chapter 47 and verse 12. And I just wanted to open with that because it reminds us of God's faithfulness and his consistency and the way that he promises to provide. And I've shared in previous episodes how my approach to most things is very holistic and really broad. And so I also love the idea of there being things that God has provided for us through nature that we may not even realize are available to us. He cares in our sickness and in our ailments and in our pain. He cares and he also provides. And so I just thought that would be a good way to open this conversation up, just being reminded of God's providence for us. Nutrition is just something that obviously we have to be mindful of on a daily basis if we are working to prioritize health and wellness, because eating is something that we do multiple times a day. And so I am excited about this conversation because, Gretchen, you have a unique set of qualifications to be a voice in this topic. And so just in case people have not listened to our first episode, would you just kind of give a reminder to us of what you bring to the table as far as your professional expertise and what you have done most recently in the nutrition department?
Sure. Well, I bring a love of food, so
Hey. I've seen it. It's true.
I love food. So my background is pediatrics. I went to medical school and did a pediatric residency and am board certified, have my medical license. And then I most recently did a nutrition and healthy living certification through Cornell University. So that was really a fun process.
That's awesome. So I know that nutrition, prioritizing that is something that you have really been able to do consistently for a long period of time. And just through our friendship, you've just shared really honestly with me about what that journey is like. And it's something that we have in common, but the way that like our prioritizing that in terms of like that's an ideal, but the way that that works itself out in your life is different from how it does in mine. I shared in the last episode too that just consistency and planning and having the mental space to really do all the practical things that have to be done, like the action part of all of that, and the mental part, is something that is just really hard for me. I don't lack seeing those things as important, but somehow the things in like my everyday life, it's the gap, right? My ideals in my everyday life are not aligning. There's things that kind of hinder that. And it's easy for me sometimes to justify it too, for falling short of the ideals. But the idea that nutrition is important, what we put into our bodies is important, the way that we care for the temple of the Holy Spirit, all of those things are important. And so I would just love it if you would kind of open our conversation with talking about nutrition and just kind of a broader picture of that and maybe even ideals in everyday life for you.
Right. I definitely feel like nutrition for me, my ideals, similar to kind of the overall health and wellness. I feel like they've evolved over time. Like I jokingly said, I love food. So I love to eat. And it seems to me that you, Jennifer, you love to prepare and to serve and to prepare that food and to enjoy that process. And I wish that I have enjoyed it as much. Like I see the
Oh,
way you enjoy it, and I'm like, man, I want to enjoy it like you do. Historically, have not been that much of a cook, and my husband and I joke because when we got married, I honestly knew how to make two casseroles. That was like the only thing I knew.
what casseroles were they?
Um, I don't even know if I should admit it. It's no, one was
Everyday
a
life.
yeah, right, the everyday life of newly married life. So see, it's never too late. You can learn new things. No, one was a chicken, broccoli, cheese, rice casserole. And then the other one was this poppy seed chicken casserole. So, chicken and all the soups and things that you would mix in with
Cream of
it.
fill in the
Cream of
blank.
all the things. So my husband was like, "Thank you so much for cooking dinner." He's like, maybe some, because I would do one casserole, we'd eat that for a few days, and then it would be the next one. And sometime can we have the food like everything separate? And I was like, I don't know how to do that, but I will try.
Oh,
And then through residency, oh goodness, we would just eat hospital cafeteria food, which the brown food is what we called it because everything was pretty much
oh my
fried and brown.
goodness.
So, yes, thankfully, my ideals have changed over time. So, similar to you, my ideal is just whole food, fresh food, fruits and vegetables. Like, my ideal world would be I have chickens in the backyard that I go and get the fresh eggs, and we have a beautiful garden with all these vegetables and spinach and broccoli and lettuce and make these beautiful salads. And oh, that would be my ideal. So we have to improvise in daily life. So my ideal really, as part of nutrition, is to really eat together as a family. Like I love the importance of that and the tradition of that and all that happens around the table. I think we both have read and probably at our Mom Heart groups read the Life-Giving Table. And so there is so much that comes from sharing a meal together. And so that is definitely my ideal is to have meals around the table together as a family. Yeah, so to have healthy, whole, real food, real homemade, that's my ideal. My everyday life, I feel like has changed. Like we were in this season when everybody was home and there were five kids, my husband, there were seven of us. So I could make this huge thing of a vegetable type based soup. And we could all feast on that, feast on veggies, and we were all together. And so now, as my children have slowly, one by one launched, like, and different schedules, things have just changed to where now there's pretty much four of us at home. And so trying to still have the importance of around the table and adjusting my my portions and my quantities because we don't want to eat the same thing for a week. Ideals have changed some, but one of the things I think as far as nutrition and as far as diets, as people would say, diet is really just what you are consuming. So there are so many types of diets, right? And I think we can be inundated with keto diet, Mediterranean diet, plant-based, vegan, all the different things. But I honestly think that the best diet is the one that you will consistently do. And I think we talked a lot about consistency last time in our first episode. And I think that consistency is the key because, you can do some type of restriction for a certain amount of time but but how long can you sustain whatever that restriction or whatever that particular diet, quote unquote, is? So I think for me, it was coming up with what is a realistic, attainable ideal that is something we can be consistent on. I don't want to do some crash diet or binge thing. I want something that is a lifestyle for our family over time. So that's kind of my ideal, the big picture of ideal for nutrition, and then a lot of the everyday life too.
Super helpful to hear how you've kind of adapted and shifted as the season of your family has changed over time. I think for us, we just have two kids, but now that they're teens, they are coming and going so much, especially during the school year when there's rehearsals and shows and all of the things that they're involved in, and somebody's babysitting and somebody has tech week, and it is so rare that we all sit down and have a meal together. And
Mhm.
that has been, over the last several years especially, it's been one of these things that we've just had to kind of relinquish and say it's just for now. And there will come, I really try to prioritize that more during the summer when all the activities have ended,
Mhm.
because we are home more consistently and the girls aren't gone all the time. But the schedules, I mean, we used, when the girls were younger and they were home for school all the time, we would have a hot breakfast, all four of us, every morning. I mean, that was the way we started our day. And then as
Awesome.
time went on and their preferences changed and when they feel like eating changed, just trying to make room for that instead of being like, no, we're gonna sit down and we're all gonna eat and then somebody's mad. I don't want to make our table time miserable. So I just really had to kind of relinquish that and just trust, like,
Mhm.
okay, we can flex here. It doesn't have to be this rigid thing. I do think, like, looking ahead into, as we just kind of get more into the nutrition topic, one of the things that I see, particularly with having so much media and resources at our fingertips and with social media, and this is, I think, the direction that marketing in social media, this is the direction that it's taken, is this obsession with optimization. So, like, what is the best way to lose 10 pounds fast? Or what is the best supplement for XYZ? Or
Mhm.
what is the best workout for losing belly fat? We see these ads all the time and these supplements or things that promise to do this thing in the best way that's out there. And so sometimes too, I think even with nutrition, we could say, well, I don't know what the best way to do this is. So then we kind of have this perfection procrastination. We don't ever actually
Mhm.
jump in and do a thing. And then especially if you come into this with sort of a, like for myself, I shared in the previous episode too, I've had some personal issues with a fear of specific foods or specific ingredients. So then I kind of get this paralysis and I'm not able to shop in the grocery store because nothing seems safe enough, or it doesn't seem like I can really nail down and settle on what direction to go
Mhm.
with food and with taking care of my family. So, Gretchen, I feel like you could probably open us up and talk more about the types of things that are promoted and how that has kind of changed, and then what are some things that still are timeless principles when it comes to nutrition.
Mhm. Definitely. I think historically, a lot of our generation, I think we have talked about before, probably grew up with like the food pyramid with all those carbs at the base of that pyramid. So I feel like things have definitely changed over time as far as what has been recommended. And there's still issues and concerns with what is the recommended daily allowance of certain nutrients and macronutrients and things like that. But I think that, like we talked about in our introductory episode, that I think the narrative is shifting to where people are taking more responsibility for the things that they are eating and for looking at, like you said, looking at the ingredients and what is all in the different things that we are picking up at the grocery store. But so basically, to start out, you want to know where you are. So like we talked about in the first episode with the DEXA and the in-body scan and the VO2 max. So all of those things will give you your basal metabolic rate. So they will give you your calorie requirement just for your body to sustain itself without any exercise added in. So it'll give you a calorie amount for this is your basal metabolic rate. This is what you need every day baseline, and then add in more for exercise and things like that. So you can start out and say, okay, this is my basal metabolic rate. And then you need to know, okay, what are my average calories? And I think historically, people underestimate the calories that we're eating. I think that we underestimate our portions. And I think, speaking of media and kind of how that has played into it, if you eat at a restaurant or if you see pictures of food, the portion size is at least double, if not triple, what you probably should have. And so it's good to get an understanding of kind of where are you as far as nutrition. And One of the easiest ways to do that is to keep a food diary. There are all kinds of apps. I think you and I have talked about different apps that we have used and which ones are easier or more difficult. Tracking, even if you just do a 3 day count of what am I actually eating and trying to be honest with yourself and knowing, like, okay, this is what I'm taking in. And a lot of those apps will break it down into macronutrients, which I think is really important. So your main macronutrients are going to be your protein, your carbohydrates, and your fats. So it's going to break those down and let you know kind of how much you're having of each one of those. That's kind of your starting point is to first you need to know where you are and what you're typically taking in a day. So keeping that food diary over several days is going to give you an understanding of where you are. And then it's also a learning process, right? So you need to learn, what does 4 ounces of chicken look like? What does 3 ounces of salmon look like? So this is one of those things where when you are starting out, it may feel like a lot of work. And so you kind of have to chunk it and take it step by step, knowing that the more you go, that you're going to more instinctively have these habits and know portions and calorie amounts and things like that. It will come more naturally the more you do it. So, understanding where you are, and like I said, keeping that food diary is a great place to start just to get your baseline. I know, Jennifer, we have talked about apps in the past. Do you have any that you use or that you have found helpful?
Yes, so the only one I've ever used is called MyFitnessPal, and it is free, and it does have in-app purchases where you can, for example, one of the things that you can upgrade and do, and you have to pay an annual, you don't pay per month. If you upgrade, you pay for the whole year at one time. So I haven't taken that leap yet, which I might. But for example, one of the things that it lets you do is it lets you set your goals through the paid version. It lets you set your goals for your macros by number of grams instead of with the free version, which I'm feeling frustrated with, it makes you just do percentages. And
Mm.
so everything has to add up to 100%. So I feel like it is limiting. There's a reason that the grams function is part of the paid
Hmm.
version because it's just more useful. And you can also scan barcodes on foods, and with the paid version, which that used to be free, now they've changed it. But you can also scan barcodes. And it will automatically put the nutrient information in. It already has that. But you can easily search up foods like whole fat cottage cheese, for example. You can search that in and pick the one that matches the nutrition information because there might be some variety, but like my protein powder that I use, it's already in there. So I can just click that. And then the things that you eat on a regular basis, it will save those and you can kind of go back through your history and pick that. But the food diary is helpful. Even if you're not setting goals yet, you can at least just be tracking what you're eating. So you would need the app for that, MyFitnessPal, if that's the one you want to use. But then the other thing that's really helpful that you kind of have to have for this probably is a little kitchen scale. And I just got a little digital scale at Walmart
Hmm.
and it has the different units on there so I could measure in grams or ounces. It even does pounds and ounces, but I don't really need that. I think the scale was like $10. So
Hmm.
you don't have to invest a lot. The app is free. You can get a little scale. I've already set goals, but I still find it hard to meet those goals. But at least being able to put those numbers in and see, and you can also, something that I have done, not consistently, but something I have done is I'll say like, okay, I know I want to have this for dinner. Let me play around with what I'm going to have for lunch so that I can meet my goals by the end of the
Yes.
day. But I can make sure that if I want 4 ounces of steak or whatever with dinner, then I know how to balance all of that out. I've even used Chat GPT to help me with that too. So I'll like take a screenshot from the app and put it in Chat GPT and I'll say, these are my goals and what I've had for breakfast already. I want to have 4 ounces of steak for dinner. What can I have for lunch?
Hmm.
And then that will help me meet my goals by the end of the day. So that is one thing that does help. But yeah, just really basics. Getting started is just pick an app and get a kitchen scale or order one
Hmm.
from Amazon or something. You don't have to have anything fancy. For me, I feel like I'm still a little bit in that early learning curve of trying to figure out how to put all the pieces together so that I do meet my goals at the end of the day. That's kind of where I am.
That's so helpful.
That app
Um,
also has, sorry, but
no,
that
you're
app
good.
also has recipes in there that because I've gotten to where if I make a recipe, then I have 10 different ingredients or 5 different ingredients. Do I put each one of those in and do I do like a fourth of what's in the recipe for my own portion? So I kind of have stopped doing recipes and instead I'm just doing like what your husband wanted. Can we do all of it separate?
Yeah, I know,
Well, I
right?
can because it's easier for me to weigh everything and put it in separately than like
Right.
mixing it all together and then portioning it out. So it does have recipes in there where if you follow the recipe, you can say, I had one serving of this recipe, and then it populates your macros in there for you.
Hmm.
And it also syncs up with your, like if you have an Apple Watch that tracks your exercise or your movement, it also syncs that up in there. So whatever calories or you've burned or whatever step your step count is, it will also log that in there. It will incorporate that into your total calories for the end of the day.
So helpful.
I do feel like it's worth saying. I feel like we obviously are already getting into a lot of granular information here, like a lot of kind of nerdy stuff, which that's why we're friends, part of why we love that. But if this feels like we're just jumping right into a lot of details, if it feels like too much, it's probably because you haven't listened to the first episode. So please go back to that if you haven't. Our first health and wellness episode really paints a broader picture for this, and it even gives you some action steps at the very end that would help prepare you for what we are talking about in this conversation. So
Hmm.
you don't have to go back and do it in that order, but that might make this episode make a little bit more sense. Gretchen, what are some things that as you're going through that initial process of just tracking what you're eating, not even doing anything with goals or making
Hmm.
plans yet, but just weighing out your food, tracking what you're eating, getting an idea for what 3 ounces of chicken looks like. How does having your morning coffee, what do you do with your morning coffee? How does that affect your goals? Because I feel like that derails me every day because I like all my fancy stuff.
Yes.
So talk to us a little bit about like the mindfulness
Hmm.
that it kind of brings when you're using these apps and kind of understanding our bodies and how they respond to all of this. Go ahead and
Yes.
give us your thoughts.
Yes. So I think getting that understanding of where you are is so important. And one of the big lessons for me just starting out on this journey years ago was understanding drinking your calories. Speaking of morning coffee, if you're drinking sodas and coffees with syrups and creamers and all of those things, that you can really, as you're tracking, you can realize where those calories are all coming from. And a lot of times we're drinking our calories. And unfortunately, when we drink our calories, it usually doesn't give us the same satiety that eating quality food would. And so it's going to make us feel hungrier. We're not going to feel as full. And so it can end up being kind of more of a waste, I should, of those calories that you have. You want to spend them well. It's like you have a budget and you have this many dollars and you really want to spend it wisely so that you get the best bang for your buck kind of thing. So that was a big lesson for me was drinking my calories. So you still can have coffee with creamers and things, but you can look for higher protein, lower calorie, or you can just slowly wean yourself off of it, which is what I did with sweet tea. I went to half and half, half sweet, half regular, and then lower and lower. And now I only drink unsweet. I'm not drinking my calories through my tea anymore. So it can definitely, like I said, you have to choose things that you can sustain and that you can consistently do. And so a lot of times it is just little baby steps in that direction, which is what I'm doing with my coffee. I'm doing less and less creamer over time and more of the coffee. And so you just can kind of play with things in that way too. And I think another important thing as far as understanding is understanding that satiety and what things are going to make you feel more satiated and more full, which is kind of the basis for the GLP-1s, the Wegovy and all the injectables that are just kind of taking the world by storm right now for weight loss. Those just help increase satiety. So they make you feel full. So how can you do that with your own nutrition? Protein and fiber are kind of your most satiating foods that you can eat. finding those low calorie, high protein, high fiber foods are going to help you feel more full and to sustain that full feeling. And then they also help to not lead to the peaks and valleys of blood glucose, which is another thing I feel like talking about the narrative shifting. I think the blood glucose shift and awareness has really been something that's kind of recently, it seems like to me, has changed just as far as a medical data kind of thing, that people are understanding their blood glucose and the importance of that with just the rise in type 2 diabetes. And if you are eating carb heavy, glucose dense foods, it's going to postprandial. So after your meal, it's going to raise that blood sugar. It's going to make you feel full for a short time and probably make you feel tired. And then that blood glucose is going to go down, it's going to crash, and then you're going to feel that shaky feeling, feel like you're starving, and that you just need to eat and eat and eat because it's your body is just going on this blood sugar roller coaster. Having more protein, having more fiber is going to keep you more on a level, steady state with your blood glucose. And so you're not going to feel those peaks and valleys. I would say about a year and a half, 2 years ago is when I really upped my game as far as nutrition, when I started having a lot more perimenopause symptoms and things like that. I knew I kind of had to make some more changes. And I will say that as you increase your protein and decrease your carbohydrate and your sugar load, that you will go through times, potentially, not everybody does, but through feeling nauseated or hungry or just, as I would say, yucky, right? But it's one of those things that you can get through it. You will get through it the more you're taking away that addiction of the sugar and the carbohydrates. And being on the other side of that, to not have those peaks and valleys of blood sugar, whew, you feel so much better. But it does take patience and it does take that consistency. But if you are kind of in the middle of that, I would just encourage you to keep going because you can get to the other side. And Jennifer, I think you and I have both in the past done continuous blood glucose monitoring. Do you want to speak to that at all and kind of what your experience was with that?
Sure. I actually got curious about that. Just, I think it was after or maybe it was while I was reading Gabrielle Lyon's book, Forever Strong, because she was talking about how your muscle actually affects insulin sensitivity and just how integrated all of these different things that we've kind of for so long heard about: build muscle, eat protein, blood sugar, but we didn't realize how closely all of those things were related. So just from reading her book, it made me curious, and I thought, I wonder what's happening with my blood sugar. And I've never really had a big sweet tooth. There are other people who I will not name who live in my house do have really intense sweet tooth issues, but for me, I really prefer more salty stuff. So I really didn't know what to expect. And we don't eat a ton of heavy carbs, really. But I did ask for my provider to write me a prescription for that. And so I was able to do it. Each monitor gives you a 2 week, isn't it 2 weeks at a
Mhm.
time? Lasts for 2 weeks. And so there's an app for that too. So you download the app and you can get your blood sugar reading at any time. You can open the app and you can see your data. And it did not tell me what I was expecting. I definitely expected my blood sugar to be higher at times than it was, but one of the things that I saw was that I was hypoglycemic at night. It's called nocturnal hypoglycemia. And this is also interesting that the days that I would exercise, my blood sugar would be more stable at night. So I was able to really see
Mhm.
just how daily exercise affected my blood sugar during the hours when I'm not doing anything. So, and a lot of times after you eat, it takes 2 hours to see that full effect of your blood sugar. You'll have it'll go up and then it'll crash depending on what you've eaten. But that was really insightful for me. And I realized movement, exercise, somehow, I didn't dig in to see, and I don't know if you could speak to this. I don't totally understand why the exercise stabilized my blood sugar, but it did. So that's another option. If you are curious about what's happening with your body, talk to your provider. They just write a prescription for it, and I think there's two monitors that come in one box. So you could actually, and I think well, the ones that I got anyway were 2 weeks at a time. So you could, even with just one prescription, you could be monitoring your blood sugar for a whole month. But you could ask your provider to prescribe that. And then sometimes those data patterns can be really insightful. I know that blood sugar can affect mood, it can affect sleep, obviously. So there's your cravings, it can give you some insight into that too. But as somebody that's really curious about data and what's happening, that I found that to be really useful. I would like to do that again. I actually have a refill still available, so I'd like to go back and try that again. But yeah, the blood sugar monitors give you some really useful information. It's fun to track that if you are into that sort of thing.
Right. If you love all the data, right? But it is a really useful tool, and it's one of those things that's low risk and potentially high reward. You can also get a hemoglobin A1C checked, which is just a lab test that is kind of a predictor of what your blood sugar has been over the past 3 months. So it kind of gives you a number for that and can let you know, like, are you close to this kind of pre-diabetic or diabetic range? So it's one of the ways that you can be kind of pre-preventive, just to prevent it from even getting close to the point of having issues with diabetes. So yeah, understanding your calorie needs, understanding your macronutrient needs, understanding what your basal metabolic rate is, potentially understanding where your blood sugar trends have been. Once you know where you are, then you can make a better plan for where you want and where you need to go. And I talked about in our first episode, we talked about the DEXA scan and how that gives you kind of your body composition. Once you have that, you can know, okay, what is my plan? How do I make a plan for recomposition? And I would say the most common situation in our culture, especially in the US, is this is a generalization, but most of us are probably overfed and undermuscled in general. I think the average daily caloric intake in the US for an adult is like 3,500 calories is kind of the average intake. And I
That is
think, and I believe the average carbohydrate is 300 grams per day is the average.
oh my word.
So, right? So, in general, on average, we are overfed and undermuscled. And we'll talk a lot about exercise too in our next discussion. But as far as working for towards a nutrition plan, knowing where you are is going to help you to understand where you need to go and knowing how you need to recompose your body. Pretty much, if you are in the overfed, undermuscled, you're probably going to need some type of calorie restriction. So we talked about doing that 3 day, or maybe you do it for a week of a food diary or calorie tracking or macronutrient, whatever you want to call it, you're going to track your intake and see kind of where you are. And if you are, the average person having 3,500 calories a day and you've done your DEXA and it says your basal metabolic rate is 2,500 calories a day. And so normally you're having 3,500, then you're going to drop it to say 3,000. You're going to drop it by 500 and track and see how that goes. Those are just very hypothetical numbers out there, not saying that that is what you would need to do, but you can take that data and then you're making decisions about it, making a plan about it. And for me, having the data takes some of the emotion out of it. When we say diet and restriction, that can bring up so many different feelings and emotions. And definitely, if you are someone who has struggled with body image, with body dysmorphia, that you definitely need to be working with a nutritionist or your primary care physician, your provider who can help you walk through with this. We are talking just kind of generally as friends and how we have navigated this space. So you have your basal metabolic rate, you have kind of what the baseline of what you would need. Then you have your food diary to where you know what you have been taking in. So you're going to say, okay, maybe by 10%, I'm going to cut and have a 10% deficit from what I normally have. And like I said, you're trying to create changes that are sustainable and that you can consistently do over time, and that it can be a lifestyle change and not just a 6 week crash. I'm going to eat only 1,000 calories a day. And, that is not sustainable. And you want to do something that is sustainable. And so you're going to make a plan based on that calorie restriction. So once you have that total calorie number, then like you said, Jennifer, when you put it in MyFitnessPal, what does that look like practically, right? So you're going to divide those calories into protein, carbohydrates, and fats. So what I like to do, because most of us are probably overfed and undermuscled, is we want to focus on our muscle. And so we want to focus on protein. And in general, if you budget within that calorie range, a gram of protein per pound of ideal body weight. So we're not saying that based on, if you are 100 pounds overweight, you're not basing that protein goal on the overweight part. You're basing on what your ideal is. And you want to have a gram per pound is in general what you want to shoot for. Now, the RDA may say less, other things may say less, but for me, I needed something simple to calculate. For me to count zero point 0.8 per this, I need some simple math in the day to day because we are in everyday life, right? So a gram per pound is it's an much easier calculation for me just on a daily basis as I'm thinking of things. And so then you can break that up into 3 meals a day. Now, you kind of want to have at least 30 grams of protein per meal to induce muscle protein synthesis. So having those kind of chunks in those, if you're doing 3 meals a day, you kind of want to bump up that protein. And having that protein in the morning, having that good high protein breakfast is going to help with that satiety and hold you over until the next meal. So dividing it that way, you have your calorie goal, which is whatever percentage you decide deficit, you're going to break that up starting with your protein and then work with your protein. Once you have your grams of protein, you can work and add in your carbs and your fats to round out 100% of that calorie goal. Then you want to play with it over time and see what kind of results you're getting, how you're feeling. It is not something that has to be set in stone of this rigid thing. Maybe you say, I went to a 20% restriction. I need to start actually more with a 10% restriction. So give yourself some grace and some time to work within that. So in discussing our calorie needs and a food diary and calorie restriction and counting our macronutrients, we're kind of in the real practical nitty-gritty part of nutrition. And Jennifer, I would just love to hear what you think are some of the barriers for people in kind of implementing these things or even discussing and thinking about these things? Like, what are some of the barriers that people may have?
I think barriers is, I think that's very appropriate. And believe it or not, I know, personally, I think my biggest barriers are a lot of it is mental.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me personally, I feel like I have prioritized nutrition for many years, for well over a decade for myself and for my family. And yet I still feel like there's a struggle it's like an uphill battle. And
Mm-hmm.
I do see now, especially that I'm 48 and things start to change for women as we get older. Well, for everybody, but the matrix of things that makes things change as you're aging for women is unique. And there's also genetics and kind of what your medical history is and all of that. But talking in generalities, I feel like for one, the aging process and like how that affects my weight and my physical health and even my mental health, that has really
Mm-hmm.
taken me by surprise and just not feeling prepared for how things would change. And certain things that I feel like I've been diligent in since we got married, but especially since the girls were little, when I first started really learning about whole foods. And I wasn't raised in a home where we ate a lot of junk. we were still eating food from the garden. And I feel like my home life growing up, we still ate a lot of very healthy food, and nobody in our family had obesity. That wasn't on either side of our family. So that wasn't something I ever saw people have to really fight against. So now, as I've gotten older, and even though I have really valued nutrition, and I feel like I've made good choices grocery shopping, and I've made good choices feeding our family, and the exceptions have been exceptions and they haven't become habits, I I still feel like how am I dealing with weight gain when I feel like I have really seen how important this was this whole time, but now I'm having to look at it even more differently. So there's a part of me, like even mentally and being completely honest, there's a part of me that kind of resents the fact that I'm still not seeing success, even though it's something that I didn't just all of a sudden realize that I need to pay attention to
Hmm.
nutrition. It's something that I have valued. And in fact, I've tried to transfer these values to my kids. So there's a part of me that kind of resents the fact that the numbers are not reflecting what I have prioritized for a long time. So that says I have to do
Hmm.
something differently. And also kind of resenting the fact that I even have to deal with it. Like, Lord, why isn't why isn't what I have been doing enough? And
Hmm.
I do I do feel that the mental part of the discipline required to do something like this consistently, I do feel like it's really hard for me to find that. And
Hmm.
there's a part of me that wants to give the excuse and say, I have a finite amount of time. I have a finite amount of mental bandwidth to take care of all the things that I have to take care of. And but then also I feel sometimes like the Lord says, you can do more than you think you can. Carrie and I were having this conversation yesterday about other things in life. He said, could I have done this professionally? Could I have done that? And I said, you may have had to work harder, but you could have. Like, I think most of us walk around never really getting to see what we're actually capable of because there hasn't been something to push us towards that, whether it's our own internal motivation, whether it's some kind of external factor, things that are going to change if in a negative way if we don't. For me, what does it take for me? Well, I'm still kind of working through that and trying to figure that out. Do I value nutrition? Yes. I mean, there was a time where I even thought maybe when I have time and the girls have moved on, maybe I'll be a nutritionist because I love it and I'm that curious about it. And I think food can be good medicine for us. Eating healthy food, like that can in itself can be good medicine. So this is something that I've been curious about and passionate about for a long time. So, what does it take for me now to really be moved in the direction to where I'm willing to keep pressing in, keep staying engaged on that learning curve with that app? Is it worth investing in paying for the annual version of MyFitnessPal so that I can actually track grams and have all those extra features? That would be less than my copay to a doctor's visit, probably,
Hmm.
or whatever I have to pay. So in that sense, would it be worth it? Yes, but I also feel like there's a part of me like I justify spending on so many other things, whether it's this supplement or that supplement or this protein powder. But I will say one of the things that has been very motivating for me has been seeing my parents age
Hmm.
and seeing how that has affected the responsibilities and like how that has affected the people who care about my parents. And neither of them they don't deal with obesity, but they haven't been lifting weights, they haven't been building muscle for the last 20 years. And just seeing how does not caring for my longevity affect the people who love me. And I think that has probably been the biggest wake up call. But even that, because it still seems so far off, even that makes it easy for me to be like, I'll start doing it tomorrow. I'll start next
Hmm.
week. I'll start on the first of the month. I'll start on
Right.
Monday. you know, you can always find a reason. I'll call it an excuse in my case. I can always find a way to justify delaying. But it does sometimes, and sometimes too, as I've gotten older, I have felt like cognitively, like I can't figure things out like I used to be able to. And I used to not struggle with things like that. I
Hmm.
love problem solving and I love trying to put puzzles together, real puzzles and also life puzzles. I just enjoy that. I'm a problem solver. And so this has been one of those things where I'm like, I can't figure out how to get my macros to work. Okay, well, chat GPT. he can do it. But
Right.
do I want to have to deal with that every day? That's adding like one more layer of technology where I'm like, I just want to eat healthy food. I don't want to have to be counting things every single day.
Right.
And then we get into our next conversation about exercise. That's one more thing where I'm like, I know it's important. And you've mentioned this to me before. I can't remember where you say it's from, but you say
Hmm.
if you don't have time to exercise today, you certainly don't have time to be sick.
Right.
But how do I rationalize that? I say, well, my kids aren't going to be home in the next few years. They're going to be gone. So that will be an opportunity for me. Then I'll have time to do those things.
Right.
Gretchen, I know you go to the gym late at night, which is amazing, and I have joined you a few times. But a lot of times late at night, my girls want to stay up and talk.
Definitely.
So I'm like, well, what do I do? Do I say, I can't stay up and talk. I can't dry your hair. I can't hang out with you and watch your favorite show because I've got to go to the gym. And then they say things like, Mom, I'm only going to be home for 2 more years.
Right.
Okay, I'll stay home. So, I know the draw on your time, like the demands on your time at home are different than mine because you have boys who are very independent. They have their own things that they do. And then being a girl mom at home, they want to be
Hmm.
with me. And like if they smell me, they want me near them. And I love that. Like there will be a time where I'm like, I wish they were here. I wish they wanted to hang
Hmm.
out. So I also kind of feel like, should I feel guilty? Should I have planned my day better? So then I have this like guilt and shame for not being more intentional with my time. And oh man, the mental game of it all. And then I think the Lord's like, Martha, you worry about many things.
Mm.
So I'm like, okay, Lord, okay.
Yes.
Sometimes I don't know
Hmm.
the best thing is for me right now.
Hmm.
But I know that it's not to be stirred up with anxiety and worry.
Definitely.
So I know I just shared a lot of kind of the mental side of things, at least for myself personally. And our hope in having those moments on this podcast, our hope is that it gives you some moments of relatability because we do want to talk about ideals, but then everyday life is where we all kind of live. And so if we can just continue to keep touching on the ideals and as we are moving through everyday life, I think that will help us to stay engaged and stay hopeful. And so my goal in sharing that side of things for myself is that you see we definitely don't have it all figured out. There's a huge mental side of it for me. Just one of our goals in these conversations is just to just be vulnerable and honest. I will say, in the meantime, while I am still not reaching my macro goals every day, and I cannot micromanage what my children eat every day and make sure that they're eating exactly what I would want them to eat. What I can do is still make sure that I'm making decent choices at the grocery store. So certain snacks that we always have at home, certain options for healthy fats, things like that. So I know one of the things that we always have is some kind of protein powder at home. And we've started using a protein powder that the one that everybody at our house will consume right now is it's like a chocolate version, but it's the Ballerina Farmer Protein, and it has 24 grams of protein per serving, and the ingredients are really clean. It doesn't have any added sugars or fake sugar in it. And it has colostrum in it as well, which is supposed to be really good for you. And then I like to have the chomps beef
Hmm.
sticks on hand for a little protein boost. Everybody at our house, believe it or not, will eat sardines. And
Oh,
so I buy
wow.
the cans of sardines. I get like the 6 pack at Costco. So those are good for omega 3s
Hmm.
and protein. What's something else? We'll get the Costco brand protein bars that are like 21, 22 grams of protein a piece.
Hmm.
And we eat a lot of eggs at our house. That's like a
Yeah.
regular staple, but I've had to start doing more egg whites because the fat content throws off my macros if I'm not careful. Gretchen, what are some of the staple snacks? And if you got a protein powder, you'll recommend. What does
Yeah, the one that everyone's been consuming at our house is called Naked Mass. So it's another one that's kind of one of the cleaner ones out there. And I don't remember off the top of my head how many grams of protein per scoop, but they have chocolate and vanilla. And I will do one of the things I like to make are the protein balls. And so I will use the vanilla naked mass protein powder and then oats and almond butter. I like to have raisins in it. I'm not a big chocolatey person. My kids will like some chocolate chips in it. So I like to make the protein balls, and then egg whites are a huge staple. I get cartons of egg whites because I will just cook those by the cup. Then snacky wise, we also do a lot of blueberries, blackberries, cherries, kiwi, and I will just have a lot of fruit just out in a little bowl on the counter. Some people are walking by, they can grab some fruit and nuts. So walnuts, almonds, those are kind of our two. Pumpkin seeds, those are some of our favorites. Milk is huge protein. Milk and yogurt for my boys. They love to consume that. I have issues with dairy, so I don't do a lot of dairy. There are some Greek yogurts and some, like the Fairlife filtered milk. I can do that a little bit because it's ultra filtered. I do a lot of the turkey chomps, so those are great, like 35 calories, 5 grams of protein. It's just great to carry in your bag if you need a little boost. And then I do eat the Quest protein bars. They have sugar alcohols in them, so they're not the best, but they are 20 grams of protein, 190 calories. So I do like the taste of those. And I've tried a lot of different protein bars. So that's kind of one of those things where I take the good, I take the bad with it. And then we do a lot of chicken and shrimp. So I will get just like the shrimp cocktail shrimp, and it's very low cal, high protein, very satiating. And then I get pre-cooked frozen chicken breasts, and they're like organic, antibiotic free, all that kind of stuff. And you can pop it in the microwave or the oven. I typically do it in the oven. And then I'll just put some avocado on it, or maybe some diced tomatoes with cilantro and a little bit of lime juice. And that is a very satiating, kind of easy snack for me. So those are kind of, some of our basic snacks that I'll have out and about. Putting a chicken breast in the oven, that wouldn't probably be what some people would think of as a snack, but it works, and it, is low calorie, high protein, and like I said, very satiating. So
Those are all very yummy, and we would totally approve. I'm listening to you mention all of the things that you guys get, and I'm realizing how dairy heavy we are at our house. I mean,
hmm
we definitely go through a lot of milk, not because I don't typically drink milk. Amelia drinks a ton of milk, but we have started drinking more milk, all of us, since we started doing that farmer protein because it's so good just mixing a scoop into a cup of
hmm
milk. But for myself, I had to buy skim milk for the first time in 15 years because the fat of the whole milk was sending me over and I wanted to save my fat for other things. There's also a brand of a brand of yogurt that I know I mentioned to you. It's called Ratio, and it's like
hmm
25 grams of protein for one little cup. So, and then cottage cheese, again, all the dairy. That's why we're going to have a cow when I'm living my best life. Because I won't have to be paying for the.
A cow and chickens, that's what we need, really.
Well, these are really good. I feel like we've been really honest about kind of the mental component, we've given a lot of the sciencey stuff, and then also just having some really practical, simple things that you can incorporate in your next grocery shopping trip. Gretchen, do you want to walk us out on this conversation with some action steps?
Definitely. So, one of the things that you'll see in our show notes page is we have little cards that you can print out, and one says nutrition and one says exercise, which we'll talk about exercise on our next episode. But it just has one, two, and three. So, you can take three kind of practical steps from what we've talked about today. And we would suggest a first step would be to identify a barrier. We talked about some of the barriers to implementing all of this, and goodness, we all have our own story and our own puzzle. And so there are going to be barriers that we have that are different from what you have. And so, really thinking about that and thinking, what is a barrier for you as far as implementing nutritional changes into your lifestyle? And once you identify those barriers, if you have a trusted friend or spouse that you can invite on this journey, man, it makes it so much more bearable and enjoyable, and you have someone kind of holding you accountable in ways that work for you and that are with someone that you trust. So to share that with a trusted friend. Maybe one of your steps is committing to a food diary for 3 days. That's a huge step, and it's a great first step just to understand where you are. Maybe an option for you for one of your steps would be to schedule one of the assessments. So to look into getting a DEXA scan or getting on an InBody or having your VO2 max done. Just taking one step and getting data from that step or understanding something about where you are from that step can really give you the motivation sometimes and can help you eliminate those barriers or kind of cross that threshold to taking some more actionable steps. So I don't want you to feel overwhelmed with all of the information and kind of the practical things that we talked about and the nitty-gritty things. Just think about three things. Maybe it is identifying a barrier, sharing with a trusted friend, or a food diary for 3 days. Maybe it's scheduling one of these assessments. Pick some of those, write them down on that nutrition card so that you can think about it over the coming days. Then have that foundation as we move into our next discussion on exercise. So we hope that our conversation has been an encouragement to you and that it has inspired some thinking or processing action steps for you. And just remember that we can't get from our every day to our ideal all at once. I mean, this is a process, and just commit to your 3 steps, commit to those goals. A few good choices consistently done leads to change. We just thank you for joining us on this journey and for finding a moment with us. And we look forward to sharing more with you next week as we talk about exercise.